Hello, my name's Brad. This is the first of these videos that I'm actually doing, so I don't exactly know what I'm doing completely. I'm just going to wing it and kind of hope for the best. At the time of recording this, um, my YouTube channel is called Bible Beard. Bible Beard. Um, I don't know if that's going to be the case by the time you see this video, or whether it's going to change, or whether anyone's going to watch this video at all. I'm just going to put it on the web, and just see if anyone does watch it. I've been quite inspired recently. I've been watching a lot of testimony videos have been coming up on my feed, and I've been just really inspired by some of the people who I've heard. And actually, I mean, to be fair, I'm doing this now, and these stories. I mean, some of these stories are incredible. These people's, really moving, life-changing things, and my story's probably not anywhere near as interesting as that. But I thought I'd share it. I'm getting baptized in 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. I should know better. It's very, very hot today. We're going for a heat wave. I have no idea what sense of my sense of time is anymore. But yeah, I'm getting baptized in a few weeks' time, and as part of that, this weekend at church, myself and the other individuals who are going to be getting baptized have been asked to do their testimonies in front of the rest of the church. It was a little bit daunting. We've only got like maximum 5 minutes to do it, so I thought I'd do this first actually because I can ramble a bit more. Because if you get sick of me, you can just turn off, or you can fast forward, or whatever. It's fine. Time isn't so much of an element here. So I thought I'd just share generally my testimony, how I came to Christ, and yeah, what it's basically done to my life, where I came from. Because I feel it's, this medium allows me to share that. And, I live, my community, my family, my friends, it's largely secular. And, it's nerve wracking. I mean, a lot of people like that, yourselves, if you've, come to Christ, at some point in your life, after, being atheist or secular, you'll know that it's really quite a difficult thing to talk about. You want to talk about it. You want to shout and scream, and in a good way, not in a bad way. You want to shout and scream in a very good way about what you found, because once Christ is with you, you want to share him with the rest of the world. You want everyone to feel what you're feeling and say, look, this is a reality. It's not just some passing. I mean, I've had moments in my life of kind of exercises or spiritual practice I've done that make me feel good for a while. I'm thinking, wow, yeah, you should really try this. It's really good. It'll really chill you out. And this is not that. This has fundamentally changed everything. Once the truth of Christ comes dawning upon you, when it really hits, when you really realize I receive Jesus into my life, when you realize and you then feel the Spirit coming upon you, it just changes everything. And so, but it's still awkward. Even despite that, it's still awkward. It's very awkward to go up to somebody who, for years, you've been, not really talking a lot about God, or if you were, you were kind of doing it in passing, or even in a joke, kind of like, and suddenly to go, oh, guess what I found on the weekend? Oh, what did you find? I found Jesus. And they're like, okay, I'm just going to go walk over here now, because, this is getting kind of awkward. So it is difficult. But, the good thing with this community, I say community, I don't know, I have a community at the moment. There's the online community, the online Christian community, the body of Christ, is that, there are plenty of people out there who do want to hear these testimonies, even from people they don't even know. It's maybe because, you yourself are new to the faith and you're trying to encourage yourself, or maybe you've been going for a long time. It's good to hear stories from people who've converted, especially in a world which is more and more becoming very, very secular. It can be very encouraging to hear stories of people coming to faith. So that's why I'm doing it, because I want to get off my chest. So bear with me. You don't have to sit around. That's a good thing. You can slip out. There's no slipping out the back of the room with me seeing you sneaking out. If you just want to turn the video off, you can do so. That's the beauty of the internet. There's no way of breaking my heart. So, yes. So I'll start with my name's Brad Fear. And yes, that is spelled Fear, as in terror. That's my actual name. Yeah. So, and I'm 36 at the moment of the time of recording. I've been walking with Christ for a few years now, but have only really, I suppose, when I say formalize, it's a bit difficult. I mean, I'll start from the beginning and then we'll get to this point. But I've been following Christ for a few years now, and I've changed churches this year, and I've kind of really ramped up my things like my Bible study, my prayer, and it seems to have really gained traction this year in a very big way, and that's why I'm kind of why I'm finally looking to get baptized, and why I'm now recording this testimony. So I come from a very secular background. My parents, didn't really speak much about God at all. They weren't like stringent non-believers. They weren't anything in particular. We just didn't really talk about it. I was never christened. It wasn't really, talking about it in the house. There wasn't really a religion in my house. So when I say a secular, I don't mean like an atheistic household. We were just a secular household. There was no belief in God either way. And so I went to like a C of E primary school. That's Church of England primary school, if there's anyone watching from overseas. So in the UK, a huge amount of primary schools are just Church of England primary schools, and so it's kind of a hangover from a day when schools were a lot more religious, and there still are religious elements to it. So we would have our assemblies and we would have prayers. We always, every time we had our lunch, we'd have the little prayer for what we're about to receive. May the Lord make us truly thankful. Amen. We learned the Lord's Prayer, and we did some hymns from the Common Praise books. If anyone in the UK can remember, so I was a child of the 90s. If you remember the Common Praise books, then please do comment about it, because it's such I saw them online the other week, like nostalgia, these old like tatty looking Common Praise books, and I was tempted to buy them to remember the old hymns we used to sing. So it wasn't like intensive. When I say we did prayers and we did you did it in assemblies, you were introduced to God, but lessons were secular syllabus. It followed all the kind of maths, science, all that kind of stuff. There wasn't a dedication to faith or religion in any way, so it wasn't an overly Christianized school. It was just a C of E school, so you had little pepperings of religious activities within there, and we would on special kind of religious holidays and stuff, so like mainly around Christmas and that, we would the school would sometimes pop up to the church, and there'd be a little service at the church, and that was about as much as religion as I got, and everyone got that. We got a little bit of kind of like prayer and hymns singing into our lives, because that's what people did in primary schools. But it did, as a child, I may have had almost like a default belief that there may be a God, because when you're little, you don't really think about life, the universe, and everything. You're just like, someone says, well, it's all here. It's this incredibly complicated, insanely wonderful world we live in. Yeah, why wouldn't it be here on purpose? Why wouldn't there be something behind that? Behind. Sorry, I'm just noticing. I do apologize. I can see my reflection in one of the enclosures. In case you're wondering, and this might suddenly make you turn off very quickly, those enclosures, by the way, I have a couple of pet tarantulas. It's my oddity. It's fine. That's fine. That's not what this video is about. But yeah, so I do apologize. You can see the back of my neck in the enclosure of the. There we go. Yeah, the salmon pink bird eater. So that's another video. The spiders is a different thing. Yeah, and that may suddenly discredit me now. People are like, oh god, he's a spider guy. Right, let's just turn it off. Anyway, so yeah, we had some basic kind of exposure. And by default, I had a feel of something made all this because why wouldn't you? You know, it's such an incredible world, it's such an incredible universe. Um, and you know, we would learn science and all that kind of stuff, and you just look at it and think, yeah, I mean, it's these phenomena that occur, the you know, the logic behind it all, you know, the processes are so incredible and so tuned. You know, wow, how wonderful God is. You just think it because that's your kid. Now, as you become a teenager, that changes because teenagers, you know, you know, it's not that suddenly you become a teenager, you suddenly become a big philosopher. Like, you know, I'd love to think that like 12, 13, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds are all going in saying, I've taken some time to really consider the ramifications of life, the universe, and everything, and I've come to many conclusions. That's not what's happening. What's happening is you're becoming a teenager, and when you're a teenager, you don't want to be seen as being childish. You don't want to be seen as being yeah, well, that probably says it, childish right there. So you kind of get things, you're like, oh, I don't believe in Father Christmas anymore, I don't believe in that anymore. And you tend to just drop God with it, right? Because you say, well, there's no evidence for God. There's no evidence. You know, there's no evidence. I mean, yeah, okay, the universe is completely incredible and logical and rational and, you know, but just because something is logical in its I say construction, be careful there, logical in its build and rational doesn't mean there's something logical or rational behind it. Of course, but but so obviously I became just atheist because I thought, well, science is one, and also when you're a teenager in particular, you get this whole idea that it's either religion or science. Right, that's it. That's what people tell you, right? Because oh, religious people, they believe all of this stuff, and they're anti-science, and they think science. And that's what you kind of get told, which is obviously not true. Um, but you get told that. So I'm thinking, well, I can't deny science, and there's some wonderful things you read about science and processes and how we're all connected to the world and connected to the animal kingdom, and that all seems really good for me. So, well, it means we're part of something bigger. I mean, not God bigger, but hey, we're part of the universe, and the universe is incredible, and it's amazing the processes behind it. Rambling a bit now, but yeah, I became atheist because it's just like, well, I don't need to believe all that anymore. I don't need God in my life. What's the point? As I became older, I became an atheist of a small a to atheist of a capital A. So this is your kind of like, that Richard Dawkins, he's my man. That's that kind of atheist, right? It's the kind of atheist where you're not just content to say, oh, I don't really think there's a God. It's where you have to go to, there is no God, and if you believe in a God, you are a fool. That's that kind of atheist, and we like pointing it out because there's nothing more uplifting to the spirit than living in a godless world and then going around and preaching that to other people, and then taking people who do have faith and making them feel small. I didn't publicly do that. I was a very introverted person, so I didn't go up to people and publicly go up to a preacher in the street and say your beliefs are ridiculous. No, but that's what I believed, and I would kind of consume a lot of atheist material, and I do mean like the new atheists and that kind of stuff. And I was content intellectually in that. I was content intellectually to say that there was no God. I mean, as the years passed, I mean, I was always very introverted anyway, and introverts, we enjoy our own company, but we also find that we're our own worst enemies. And I spent prolonged periods of time in kind of like in university. I had a really bad nodular cystic case of acne, so cystic acne. So in case there's any uncertainty about what that is, if you Google it, nodular cystic acne. So rather than just being spots, these things were cysts, massive cysts, and I covered every part of my face at all times. It was, and when you're in university, that's like the worst kind of like the worst hit to your self-confidence you can get. So I was already introverted, and I had this, and I just didn't want to go out anywhere because I just felt like I was horrific. I just covered in this shape, and my face was just molded. I mean, I've still got, probably can't see, but like, so I got a bit of rouge light coming from this side. I couldn't find anything else to put there, so there's a slightly kind of hazy, maybe even slightly infernal look up on me. But you can see I got these scars. Well, I know I got these scars. just yeah, nodular cystic acne. They're there still. These puck marks on the side, but I went through quite an intensive regime uh, of drugs to get rid of the acne. It took a few years, but that just it meant so. And in the end, I ended up leaving university early. I was doing a script writing course at the time. Always enjoyed writing, but I left early because I was in pits of despair and depression. And while it got better when I came back and I got a job and I started kind of getting on with my life, I always had this very nihilistic view of the world. I used to like writing things that were quite despairing, and I realized that that's kind of where my heart was. The universe is empty. It's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. You have to make meaning for yourself, which was supposed to be the uplifting part of it, right? You say, well, you make meaning for yourself. That's a good thing. Um, and it's only now. I mean, I hadn't realized this at the time. It's only now when I look back and realize how flimsy a foundation that is. Like if you say, well, I can make the world whatever I want to make it. Okay, that's fine. But in order for you to believe that, you have to believe the first foundation, which is there is no intrinsic and objective meaning to the universe. You have to believe that first before you can believe I make reality for myself. And the problem is once you do believe that, once this starts to fracture, there's no safety net below you. There's just the abyss of nothingness and meaninglessness, which is why, from what I'm led to understand, there is a notable difference in the levels of things like hard depression, anxiety, and suicide in people who are atheists compared to people who are of faith. And I had bouts of prolonged anxiety, depression, but I didn't think I'm going to go looking for God. I mean, because again, I thought myself, firstly, I still didn't believe in God. Intellectually, it was beneath me intellectually to believe in God. I thought intellectually beneath me. That was the first thing. Also, I thought, well, you can't believe something you don't believe in. I can't tell myself, well, it'd be nice to believe in God, because I didn't necessarily think that was true either. I thought, well, look, I've just got to get to terms with this stuff. But you can't believe something you don't believe in, right? That's simple as that. You can't coerce someone into believing something. They either do or they don't. And time carried on. Now, what actually changed for me, funny enough, I always refer to it that God found me and brought me in. He snuck me into Christianity through kind of like a long back route. So I didn't realize I was being taken. Like when you have children and like you got to take them to the dentist. You try to get them out and you say, well, we're going to go for ice cream. I mean, don't actually do this. I don't actually do this to clarify, but you're like, oh, I'll tell them and take them for ice cream, then actually take them to the dentist. It's like God knew, I think, that I wasn't going to be convinced by any Christian to become Christian. So he kind of did this long route round, which eventually took me there. So after my son was born, he's now 9. When he was born, I mean, having children fundamentally changes all your priorities in your life anyway, and it did for me. It completely changed my life. I suddenly just looked at the whole scope of things, and I had a new sense of meaning and of purpose. But I still wasn't looking for any spirituality at the time, and I still had intermittent bouts with severe depression and anxiety. But what was happening around the same time? I was looking. I do a lot of fiction writing in my spare time, and there was this idea I was working on at the time, which was a fantasy, and I was creating this fictional culture within it. And so I thought this culture has got to have some kind of religious foundation to it, and I mainly because they were kind of very much connected with nature, and I thought, well, okay, let's look at some of the philosophies, spiritualities, and try and create this cultural belief system. And at first I cast my eyes to the east because that's where you normally go. You think, well, okay, I want to look for good whole Eastern wisdom, because I'm always led to believe that was at the time I was like, when you're an atheist or a secularist, you have less problems with Eastern wisdom because it's feel like it's a great wisdom tradition. It's not beliefs in God. And at the time I was reading a lot about Buddhism, and Buddhism was great for me because it was like, well, there's no God, and it's completely pragmatic. It's about just sitting down, and especially with Zen, if you ever look at Zen meditation in a nutshell is kind of sit down, shut up and pay attention, and that's basically it. And so for me that was great. It's like, well, I can meditate, and I mean, again, I wasn't looking to do this at first. I was reading about the spirituality for this fictional culture I was creating, but then I started reading more about Buddhism, and I was like, there's something in this. It's pragmatic, it's secular. There's no, I mean, you with certain schools of Buddhist thought, you can add a lot of the more spiritual stuff if you want. The old bodhisattvas of the past, and and you can add a lot more of a spiritual dimension. Tibetan Buddhism, has a much more spiritual, you know, supernatural elements to it, whereas Zen doesn't. For example, Zen is very pragmatic. It's very much just of the here and the now. It doesn't concern itself with those bigger issues because it feels that they're kind of distractions from you being here and now. And so that was great for me. I thought, well, this is good, and I actually thought this actually could be something for my life. I could actually apply this to my life. This actually could be something that could help me. And so I did practice as a Zen Buddhist for a couple of years. I was training under a Zen monk in Exeter, and yeah, it for a while it really seemed to help. I would sit down, I would meditate every morning, I'd meditate in the evening, and it does help. Meditation is kind of good for that, right? You sit down, you're in the moment, you're here, you're now, you're just with yourself, and you do start to spot things about yourself and your mind dwelling off, and you kind of bring it back, and and you just do that, and it can help. But what happened after a period of time is it felt a bit like firefighting. So I still had this fundamental belief that the universe was meaningless, but hey, I was now in the moment, and in the moment is where reality is. So it all felt like, okay, this can help me, but it was just like firefighting. I would still get anxiety and depression. I would then meditate, trying to ground myself, and it would work for a while, and back we'd go, and round it would go. Now that wasn't enough to make me then just say, well, I'll give up Buddhism. But at the same time, because of this, what journey I'd begun with this whole fiction piece I was writing and trying to study these other cultures and religions, is I kind of expanded out a little bit anyway. I started, Buddhism wasn't the only thing I was kind of like researching at the time. I started researching like Hindu belief, Taoism, Chinese Taoism, and stuff like that. And also just for my own mind, I was looking towards the West as well. The religions I thought I knew about, and I found more about them. So like about what Islam was really about Judaism. Christianity, funnily enough, it was like, well, I don't need to do much research on Christianity. I know what Christianity is, right? I've been raised in the West. I know what Christianity is. I don't need to look into that. So I had a lot of these books. There was some about just religion, philosophy, mythology. I had all these books, and I was kind of obsessed for years just on on mythological symbolism, on like I say, philosophy, life philosophy, moral philosophy, and religions, and how the kind of this conjunction between culture and shared mythos and philosophy. And I started collecting these books, and then I realized one day, and I don't know how it happened, considering I'd said to myself, I can study all these religions and not worry too much about Christianity. I had books like the Hindu, like the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. I had like the Tao Te Ching from Taoism. I had a copy of the Quran. I had all this stuff, and I was just interested in studying it. But I realized one day, I looked at my books, and I had a sizably larger collection of books about Christianity, specifically about the Bible, but also hugely about Jesus. I had a lot of them. And I couldn't remember doing that. I couldn't remember buying more books about Jesus. And I was at first like, why has that happened? And what I started to kind of realize, well, Jesus is great. I like Jesus. I thought I never had any problem with Jesus. I mean, he's the perfect good guy, right? He's the good guy. He's a great moral philosopher, as they would say in the atheist kind of ways. Great moral philosopher. He's a great shining example, and the self-sacrificing story. It's a good and timeless story, right? Sacrificing oneself for the world, right? Who can't admire that? So I thought maybe I'm just endeared by him, and plus, we're in the West. You hear about Jesus everywhere, so it's hard not to be endeared by Jesus. But if I'm not a Christian, I believe in God. But what was starting to happen through my encounters with all these different religions, and obviously God means something different in different religions, and from the East, you get a concept of God there that's more pantheistic. And I found that I was starting to endear to. Was starting to endear to? Is that the right word? I was starting to be moved by that. Because I thought that kind of spiritualized the world to me. I mean, I think it was Richard Dawkins might have said something about how he thought pantheism was just sexed up atheism. I think I might have this terminology. I might have used that myself. I do apologize if that wasn't his terminology. But it was kind of like, well, look, basically pantheism is basically saying everything is spiritual and it's all part of the mind of God. And I was kind of that appealed to me a bit more, and I found actually, that meditating upon the fact that there might be a God just started to do things to me. But again, intellectually, I couldn't commit to anything but a pantheistic sense of God. But that was a step forward. But Jesus wouldn't leave me alone, to the point where I really tried to integrate him in whatever I was doing. So this is where I started consuming, say, the Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross. I started consuming those because mysticism had such a kind of, air of mystery about it. Mysticism, you look at Christian mysticism, Jewish mysticism, Islamic mysticism, it all has the same flavor. We can't essentially know it, so we sit in silent reverence and we try to tap into whatever that is, but we can't really speak of it. And that was fine again, because it was like, well, actually, that's, to me, that kind of that meant it was a bit more safe, because I don't get to speak about too much about mysticism. But again, Jesus kept calling to me. It wasn't enough to just speak out. I felt like I needed to speak about Jesus, and I suddenly realized I had a couple of different translations of the Bible, which was a big step for me. Not just having a Bible, I had like 3 translations of it. I had the RSV, the ESV, and the NIV, and I made a point of getting ones that looked quite nice and I could hold on to, and it felt quite personal. And I started watching certain videos online because I thought I want to learn a bit more about how this all works. And I was watching things like the Bible Project videos, and other kind of channels like that were kind of quite informative, very informative, broke down what the overall story was and all that kind of stuff. And time went by and I just kept on, in hindsight, every time I'd think about, say, the Buddha or Buddhism or Krishna or anything like that, there'd be some inner kind of, those stories. I'd be kind of like moved by those stories and I'd be intrigued. But every time Jesus came back, there was just this pull and this huge rush in me, like of homecoming. And I don't mean like in the sense of returning to my past, because again, Jesus wasn't a big part of my life, but in a way of like, this is good. And I couldn't quite understand what that meant. And so I then found myself being pulled into a lot of the more, a lot of books I had were like progressive Christian stuff, which talked about, it had a more secularized version of Jesus, which made it safer. It was like, because again, I was like, I don't want to come into all this Christian stuff. It's all these problems and Christianity, and believing in the Bible and it's so judgmental and I can't be doing all that. But what I started to realize was that I was being pulled in by this Jesus person, and it wasn't enough to just see him as a moral philosopher. Something else kept calling to me. And the closest thing I can think to it when I look back and I read the Bible in Matthew and in Mark, where Jesus sees Simon, Peter, and Andrew in their fishing boat, and then he sees James and John, and he just says, "Follow me," and they just do. It's like they're compelled. And same with Matthew in the tax collector's booth, and Jesus just says, "Follow me," and he just does. Because once Jesus calls, you just can't resist. And looking back, that's what it was like. It was like something in me. Every time I come to Jesus, Jesus was saying, "Come on, just follow me." And I'm saying this now, and I'm getting genuine goosebumps. I don't know how good this Google camera is. I can't show you. No, it's fine. I'm going to show you my hairy arms. But like, yeah, it was like, follow me. Follow me. And he wouldn't give up. And so I went into this progressive Christian kind of phase, and I thought I want to go to like a church, but not a church, because churches are, I don't want to go to a church because I'm not a Christian. I'm a progressive Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus, but I'm not a Christian. So I go to a church. So what I did end up doing was I ended up going to a Quaker meeting house. So I used to live in Wellington in Somerset in the UK. And I went to a Quaker meeting house. And if people don't know how Quakerism kind of works now, it comes from it's kind of a very like almost like a mystical kind of like closest thing you get to a mystical tradition of Christianity. And the kind of the style of worship that Quakers adhere to is very different than conventional worship. Basically, you come into a Quaker meeting house, and you sit with the rest of the congregation. You call them friends. Friends, you come and sit with them in this room, and it's an hour where you sit in silence. Now, it doesn't have to be remain silent. If you or anyone else in the room feels prompted by the Spirit, you feel something coming in, or you feel like you might have a message that might be from God or the Spirit or whatever it is, you will stand up, normally for about a minute or two, and you will say what you say, and then you'll sit down again. And people normally will then kind of just remain in the silence, and they may take that in, and other people may get up. They may not at all. There was times where I go into Quaker meeting houses, and it would be completely silent for the whole hour. And that was great. It was fine. I still felt moving. And at the end, a couple of the elders would get and they would shake hands, and then everyone in the room would shake hands with each other, and then we may talk about things that we encountered whilst we were in that moment, or we may not. And the idea was that the Quaker belief was that, well, the Spirit will move and will teach us. And there were always, in the middle of the room, there was always a couple of Bibles, and other spiritual texts there for people to dip into if they wanted to. Very rarely did anyone ever pick up a Bible, and we never really talked about the Bible. So part of me thought, well, this is all good for me because it's kind of mystical and it feels safe and it appealed to this whole thing. But at this point, I'd started to believe in God. But again, it was a change. It was going from something that was pantheistic now to something that was like panentheistic, something that was pantheistic but kind of was interested in us, something that did kind of love us, and Jesus was kind of in tune with God. That was how I was seeing it, but I don't know if he was God because I don't know what that means, and I couldn't work it all out. But I thought, well, hey, this is where the place to kind of find out, right? But the fact that we didn't talk a lot about the Bible, about Jesus, just left me feeling hungry. And I'd go home and I'd start reading the Bible again. I'd be like consumed, like follow me, follow me, follow me. And I get more and more books, and suddenly I had shelves and shelves. I mean, that's not there. These my Bible books are all over there somewhere. There's my manga books up there, I think. So, I would be, incidentally, if you see these spider webs, those aren't from actual real spiders. I've decorated my room with a couple of fake spider webs because of my tarantulas. Again, another story. So yeah, I felt this fire for me burning in me that I have to know more. I had all these books about Jesus, and they were going beyond just progressive Christianity. They were going from traditional sources, biblical scholars. I was obsessed. And I found that when I sat in prayer, whether it was silent prayer or actually dared to actually pray with my mouth, things moved in me in a really deep way. And I found myself in this whole position where I was like, I'm believing all this. And I have for a while. And I started reading apologetics, particularly C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is always the best one for us atheists because that's where he came from. He was a staunch atheist and an academic. And it was perish the thought I could ever believe in such complete nonsense. And then he became a full-blown believer, and his book still remains some of the best apologetic works out there. And I read it and I thought, and I read all these other great scholars, but these are really intelligent people. These are intelligent, wise people, and they make their case as well. It is not intellectual suicide to believe in God, because even though I'd had all this feeling in me, even though Jesus had been calling out to me all this time, I was still holding back because I was like, I can't commit that intellectual suicide. But I was realizing more and more, no, I'm not. I seem to be putting up this resistance that doesn't need to be there. Why am I so stringent? And I realized it was not because I was struggling intellectually. It was because I realized I was worried about what people would think. I thought people will think I'm an idiot, rather than me realizing there is a logic and a reason to this. Indeed, if there is any logic or reason in this universe, why is there not a logic or a reason behind it? The universe is a reasonable place, but it's here for no reason. It's a logical universe, but there's no logic behind it. We have to find meaning for ourselves, but meaning is not a real thing intrinsic in the universe. I just thought, I'm realizing that none of this makes sense anymore. And that Jesus has called me to this position where I'm now obsessing over him. And I didn't plan that. The pandemic hit, and we couldn't meet for worship anymore. I lost two of my grandparents during the pandemic, not to COVID, funnily enough. They both died of cancer. And I've been very blessed in my life. I get to know all these grandparents. They lived into their 90s, late 80s, 90s. And I'd never had to deal with the death of a close family member, which could be a blessing, could also be a curse because it means I wasn't ready. and it shook me up. And we were in a time where we couldn't publicly meet for worship, but I found that when I had my faith and when Jesus was there, I was overpowered, and it all made sense. I thought, all of us become slightly theistic to a degree when someone dies. Even when I was an atheist, I thought I wouldn't sit there and just say, well, they're gone now. They're gone. They're coming back. And when the memory of them dies with us, they'll be gone to history forever. No, I was like, you always kind of know they're only gone for a time. They've gone somewhere else. And I just found it was such, on the one hand, it was a dry period for spirituality because of the pandemic, but it also meant that I had time to really go into it in a way I had not done before. And we moved during the pandemic from Wellington to Taunton, so we moved further away from the meeting house. So it wasn't feasible once the pandemic ended to keep going to the Wellington meeting house because it was too far away and petrol was expensive. So I thought, well, I need to go somewhere in town. And there is a meeting house in Taunton, a Quaker meeting house. But I thought, well, if we're going to go to a new church, let's just have a look and see what's there. And I watched a few church services online for different local churches and ended up going to the Taunton Vineyard. And it was a completely different kind of thing. It was a full-blown Christian worship service. You'd go and there'd be singing, worship, proper singing, praise and worship to God. There was prayer, sermon, and a community with a real fire for Jesus. And I realized I'm here. I'm here. And that's when I was then able to start telling people about my faith. I'd kept it from my wife for a long period. Actually, even though I was going to Quaker Meeting House, my personal beliefs about Jesus and I kept for a while, just because I was, we married as atheists. I was worried what she would think, and it meant the world. It meant the world to me that she would support it. And you know what? God kind of told me, in my own way, in my heart, not from the sky. You just got to trust that your marriage is good enough for this. And I told her, and she was so supportive. She said, I can tell it's been helping you. And she could see the change. She could see how I'd managed to, at the end of the pandemic, I went on to antidepressant drugs for about 6 months. I was in a serious state of anxiety at that point. And it was faith. Because for a while I'd put down in the pandemic. So I had this period of like fruitfulness of completely consuming scripture. And then I had about 8 or 9 months where I didn't look into it at all. My spiritual edge just died for 8 or 9 months. And in that period, that's when the anxiety hit. And it wasn't until I was then going back for my books again and I found all my books about Jesus and stuff. And suddenly it was again, like just straight away, like homecoming. It was like, this is it. This is the way out. And it was when I started taking up regular prayer again and regularly studying the Bible that I was able to come out of it, and I had the confidence to say, I don't need these drugs anymore. And part of me was worried, well, what happens when I drop them? Maybe the feelings I'm having now because of the drugs, but no, I dropped them, and I've never needed to go back. I always remember one encounter I did have in the Quaker Meeting House, actually, which I'll never forget. I was sat in there, and it was about 20 minutes in, and normally I didn't always close my eyes. I had my eyes slightly open, just kind of vaguely staring off into the carpet, as you kind of do, and things start to go weird when in your peripheral and that. But I was just staring for the carpet, and I'd always sit in the corner of the room. I didn't like sitting on the chairs where the sun directly hits you, because an hour of being sat in the sun, you start to cook. So I'd always sit in this nice little corner on an old bench, and the sun never hit there. It always hit the far wall, or it would face the other way. And this one time I sat there and I became aware, kind of just looked down at myself, and there was just all of this. This was about 20 minutes in, 25 minutes in of complete silence. And there was this light all around me, and this warmth. And for a minute I thought, I'm in the sun again. And it wasn't until I kind of looked up in my peripheral, I looked up, and I knew the sun wasn't anywhere. It was hitting the far off wall where it always did. But it's what it felt like. It felt like I was directly in the sunlight for a minute, but not in a uncomfortable way. like in a warm way, like if you've been out in the cold fire and you suddenly step in front of a nice fire, you're like, this is good. And I got all these tingles and this feeling of incredible peace in my mind, of just being present with someone or something. And all I had in my head, and it was just 3 words. It said, "This is real. This is real." And there was this thing like an inner laughter. And when I was laughing, I was thinking, when I come out of this, I'm going to try and explain this away. And the very idea of explaining away at that moment seemed really weird and silly. It's like, this is real. There's this light upon me. There's this warmth. There's something here. This is real. Don't worry about explaining it. Just be in it. And it so moved me. And I did try to explain it away when it happened, for this might have happened with that. But it didn't change what it had done to me. And I think that was in late 2019, so it was not long before the pandemic happened. And that was when I really realized that was the moment where I totally realized that I was trying to dance around it with mysticism and vagueness and progressive Christian kind of, secular ideas. But I realized, no, this is real. This is God. I believe this. I believe that Jesus has been calling to me for years. And every time I went away, he just waited. He waited until I was helpless, until I started despairing, and he called again. And when I recognized he was there, I was just overwhelmed. And yeah, that's where I am. I've received him into my life, and I'm getting tongue tied because I don't know how to describe what how it's fundamentally changed everything for the best. I still have hard times. I'm not pretending that, if you find Christ, you'll suddenly be sitting on a cloud of joy every minute of your life, because you will suffer. You'll have despair and depression, anxiety, but you just sit and you pray or you worship, and God's just there. And it feels like you've constantly got something there. You suddenly re-look at your suffering, your depression, rather than seeing it as just this magnetic pull that's pulling you down to complete destruction and meaninglessness. Instead, you see it as a trial. You see it as a moment you're like, I'm going through this now, but this is good. This is me this is flexing our spiritual and psychological muscles. It's us saying, this is hard because of this, because I've got too much pride, because I'm too attached to this or whatever. That's what's happening right now. So I need to give myself to God. I need to be humble. I need to give myself to God. And when I do that, he'll pull me through. And when he pulls me through, I will be able to look back on that period as a trial. Not comfortable, because when is a trial ever comfortable? If you go to a gym and you're trying to gain some muscle, you're going to have to lift the weights that are a bit heavy. If you lift the light ones, it's comfortable. There we go. That's great. You ain't going to gain any muscle. So you've got to go for the things that hurt. You've got to jog, not just a little brisk walk around the block. You've got to run until it hurts. And that's what we have here. We have trials that encourage us into God. So that's my testimony. I've actually really enjoyed doing this. It's been hugely cathartic. I don't know if I'm going to edit this at all. I might just leave it as it is in all its imperfection, because it feels so right. I have really enjoyed this, and I'm hoping to do more videos about just talking about Jesus and the Bible. And I'm not an expert by any stretch of imagination, so this channel, if you come here looking for an expert's opinion, I'm not that person. I'm just a person who's a part of the body of Christ like everyone else, and I like to talk about it and start dialogue. So I'd really like to do more videos. I hope I can do more videos. And I really hope that there will be some people watching this, and that they will put comments in, and that when we do start that conversation going, I can get to share in the joy of receiving Jesus with the rest of you. So thank you very much. Hope to speak to you again soon.